Well, there I was sitting on my couch playing some Pal World when a notification showed up on my smartphone. Those rascals at Nintendo are suing someone again. Well, that's the bat signal for me to rush to the camera and sort out what's going on this week on It's All Doug in Games. Hey everyone, it's Doug from It's All Doug in Games. You haven't heard from me in about a week. That's because I've been on my couch convalescing, healing from all the wounds I received and the sick burns. In the comments to my previous video, we're not going to touch that topic for a little bit. That seems to have been a little bit hot. Too hot to handle, but we are going to get into another Nintendo adjacent topic because Nintendo, about an hour ago, filed a lawsuit against Tropic Haze LLC. No, that is not a dispensary. Those are the creators of an emulator called Yuzu. Yuzu, for those who aren't in the know, is of course a Nintendo Switch emulator. And of course, if you have some means of grabbing the decryption keys from a Nintendo Switch games, you can use that to play them on a PC or a Steam Deck. As you might imagine, this didn't really sit well with Nintendo. I can't imagine it ever sat well with Nintendo. And eventually, they will set their Nintendo lawyer on the job, and they did, in fact, today, this Tuesday afternoon. A 41-page lawsuit was filed, basically calling out numerous alleged infractions of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, otherwise known as the DMCA, among other things, implying that Yuzu is a circumvention device, allowing someone to circumvent the various and myriad copyright protections, copy protections of the hardware and software behind the Nintendo Switch. Now, this is an important situation. This is going to be a big lawsuit, and there's a lot at stake here, beyond just Yuzu being able to continue to exist. A lot of folks, the initial reaction that happened on the internet, on Twitter or X, if you will, was pointing out that Nintendo probably has a very large hill to climb due to a lawsuit that was of similar nature back in the year 2000, when Sony Entertainment sued Bleem, which was a company making an emulator for the original Sony PlayStation. And in part, it used aspects of the Sony PlayStation's BIOS. So it's a copyrighted system for running the Sony PlayStation games. Now, in that case, is pretty much everyone on Twitter pointed out immediately, Sony lost that case. And lost their right to have their games played strictly on the Sony PlayStation hardware. So, users could, in fact, with the Bleem software, play their Sony PlayStation games on other platforms, thus perhaps deriving Sony of the sales of PlayStation hardware. So, in fairness, and again, I'm going to be as even-handed as I can on this. I wasn't as even-handed last time, remember? Yeah, that didn't go well for me. It is going to be a tough hill to climb, I think, for Nintendo to get a different ruling. Now, we did a video a few weeks back talking, strangely enough, about Pal World, as I referenced in the opening here, and how there were a number of lawsuits over the years that came down from companies that didn't like that games were made that were too close in design and aesthetics and gameplay from their own properties, and there were different decisions handed down for basically the same types of suits, some for and some against the complainants. So while Sony did in fact lose the lawsuit to Bleem, that is not a foregone conclusion and makes the Nintendo versus Tropic Haze a open and shut case. A lot has happened in the last 24 years, particularly in terms of various amendments and things that have changed in the DMCA, and there's been a mountain of case law relative to this in that last 24 years. So, it's yet to be seen what's going to happen in terms of how this lawsuit is going to turn out. But like I said, I will suggest here that there is a lot more at stake beyond just Yuzu being able to, in fact, continue to exist. People have pointed out on the same Twitter threads that it is perhaps a bit of sour grapes from Nintendo making this lawsuit, realizing that perhaps they're engaging in what the kids like to call lawfare, where you sue someone out of existence whether or not you think you actually have a case. And I will, in the interest here, in trying to be fair and balanced, admit that, yes, Nintendo may be acting a bit out of spite here. So I will say, I don't think there's necessarily any good guys, per se, on either side of this equation. But again, I think that there's a lot more at stake on this particular lawsuit than the issue of whether Yuzu can go on is an ongoing concern. I think this portends a lot towards emulation in general, particularly emulators for current generation consoles that are still available in the commercial marketplace. See, if Nintendo loses this case, and I realize that a lot of people are cheerleading for it and hoping for it, but boy, if this isn't a case of be careful what you wish for, it's going to be read not only by Nintendo, but by the Sonys of the world, the Microsofts of this world, that they may well draw the conclusion that they have a heck of a time legally defending their physical media and the ability of it to be manipulated, ripped, and played on other platforms. Neither Nintendo, nor Microsoft, nor Sony are really going to be keen on the idea of their media being played pretty much anywhere because, of course, it's going to hurt their hardware business, and it's just not what they want. So, if Nintendo fails here, I would have a hard time believing that has been theorized for the longest time now that physical media on modern consoles is going to be around much longer. Worst case, I could see Nintendo kind of drag kicking and screaming into not completely refactoring the Switch 2 and having physical media there, but that's probably it. And I also see Microsoft and I see Sony thinking, wow, yeah, our next generation consoles, forget physical media. If we can't protect it, we're just not going to have it, regardless of whether you stand on it. I realize that that's going to annoy and trigger a lot of people, and I'm not taking sides. I'm just making an observation of how they're likely to see it. But let's take it a step further. Let's say that Nintendo loses this lawsuit, and that maybe is the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and it's the death of physical media. People are still going to want to get their games for free, folks. People are still going to figure out ways to extract the downloaded games from either a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation 17 or an Xbox XL, SX, FBI, CIA, whatever, and share it around the internet. And eventually when that happens, then the game companies are going to say, all right, well, we can't trust you with physical media. We can't trust you with downloaded games. We're just going to move entirely to streaming. I mean, when you think about this for a second, in the last year or two, you've seen a lot of innovations and a lot of companies dipping their toes in the concept of just having game streaming. It's not that we're not selling physical media. We're not even bothering with electronic copies of games being downloaded. We're just streaming the games on demand. And I can see a world where that ends up being the only way you play modern or new games. If game companies don't feel that they can protect their investment and their intellectual property, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of whether you feel you should ever have to pay for anything. Your feelings don't matter here. I'm sorry. I know I said that before. Ooh, that was the point, by the way, in the last video where our engagement went right, just like that. Well, anyone that's still here, it just is what it is, folks. So again, yeah, Nintendo might or might not win this case, but in my humble opinion, and I feel like I'm the first here to say it, of probably the 100 people rushing to just tell you that there's a lawsuit, I'm here to tell you there's a lot more than just Yuzu or Tropic Haze or Tropic Thunder or Bubblegum or whatever the name of that emulator is. Look, I'm an old guy. I'm allowed to do that on the line here. And with that, I'll ask you to jump in the comments and let me know what you think. A crazy notion. Set your phasers to stun, and let's do it all over again. Folks, if you like the cut of my jib, please consider liking and subscribing. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time on It's All Dug in Games.